Looks remarkable. All right, let's get some business news for you now. Kate Moody is with us in the studio. Hi there, Kate.
Hi, Laura.
And coming up, a big day for Boeing. Regulators are going to meet to decide whether or not the 737 MAX can fly again.
Absolutely. Regulators from 33 countries around the world are going to be meeting with the Federal Aviation Administration on Thursday. They're going to walk through their concerns about the 737 MAX planes and look at what Boeing has proposed so far. European regulators have already laid out their conditions. They want to approve Boeing's changes themselves rather than relying on the FAA's judgment. And they want to make sure that all pilots and crew are adequately trained to fly the planes with those design changes. The 737 MAX fleet has been grounded across the globe since March after the second deadly crash involving the model in 5 months. 346 people were killed. Thousands of jobs are at risk in the UK and potentially here in France after British Steel collapsed. The manufacturer's owner, Grey Bull, has blamed uncertainty over Brexit for its financial collapse. In France, there's also concern about the knock-on effect for the Ascoval steel plant, which British Steel bought earlier this month. Naomi Lloyd has the details.
Britain's steel-making industry once supplied almost half the world. Now it's been thrown back into crisis, with news that the country's second largest producer, British Steel, has collapsed. It employs more than 4,000 people, and another 20,000 jobs depend on supplying the plant.
Basically, it's the heart of the town, and if the heart stops beating, services, retail, everything else that's around it, and other core services will be affected massively.
In 2016, private equity firm Grey Bull Capital bought the plant from Tata Steel for a nominal £1. 3 years on, Grey Bull says it tried to keep British Steel alive, but an already challenging market, compounded by uncertainties over Brexit, proved insurmountable. Last-ditch talks with the British government failed to secure an emergency bailout. At Ascoval steel mill in northern France, workers are worried about their future. Earlier this month, British Steel bought the plant, pledging to invest €47.5 million and guarantee the jobs of the 270 employees, part of a rescue deal under which the French state and local authorities would match the investment.
I'm going to be frank with you, it's not as if there were 15, 20 or 30 buyers rushing into an economic field, steel, the steel industry, which is difficult today. This explains why, unsurprisingly, this recovery is always complicated, difficult with ups and downs. We will remain behind Ascoval's employees.
The French government says it has been given assurances by British Steel that the deal will still go ahead.
4 mobile phone operators in the UK and Japan are suspending sales of new Huawei devices, including those that could be used on the forthcoming 5G network. It's the latest twist in the saga that's pitted Washington against Beijing. The Trump administration says Huawei's links to the Chinese government pose a security risk. Last week, it restricted sales to Chinese telecoms companies. It later announced a 3-month reprieve. Google has since announced that it would be cutting ties, which means that Huawei phones won't be able to use its Android operating system. The British chip designer ARM has followed suit. Huawei says it understands the pressure its suppliers are facing, but it remains confident that the situation can be resolved. Let's check in on the day's trading action now. A muted close for the major European indices as investors watch those ongoing trade tensions between the US and China and the tech industry's growing involvement in the dispute. Shares of the British retailer Marks & Spencer dropped 9%, despite a 27% jump in its profits. Wall Street's also sliding. Minutes from the Federal Reserve's latest meeting show the US Central Bank saying it's not planning to make any moves on fiscal policy, even if the U.S. economy improves. The U.S. Treasury Secretary speaking to Congress this afternoon, he's admitted that American consumers may pay higher prices in the coming months as a result of the U.S. tariffs imposed on Chinese imports. Moving on to some of the day's other business headlines now. Shares of QUALCOMM have tumbled 12% after a U.S. judge ruled the chipmaker had violated antitrust law and suppressed competitors. Qualcomm plans to appeal. Just last month, it settled a multi-billion-dollar case with Apple, but the latest ruling could open the door to still further complaints. Amazon shareholders have voted against proposals to curb sales of its facial recognition software. Critics wanted the company to stop selling the technology to governments because of concerns about civil liberties. Congress has also been discussing the possible implications of such software. And Nike has withdrawn a new special edition sneaker after an indigenous community in Panama accused it of copying a traditional design. Lawyers for the Guna tribe said the shoe resembled the mola pattern, violating intellectual property rights. Nike had initially claimed the design was a tribute to a frog in Puerto Rico. It has since apologized for the, quote, inaccurate representation. What role should migrants play in an economy, and how should governments help include them? It's a question I put to Tareq Hadhad. He's a Syrian medical student turned refugee turned entrepreneur. He's now the founder of Peace by Chocolate, the company that his family rebuilt after moving to Canada. Take a listen to his story.
So my family started the business in 1986 in Syria. The business was growing phenomenally, that my father, within 10 years, opened the second largest chocolate factory in the Middle East. Everyone in my family was really being raised to have a successful path for themselves. I had a very successful path in medicine. My siblings were becoming engineers, pharmacists, dentists, and really everyone was contributing to the economy and to the society in a different way. What happened is by 2012, the whole factory was bombed by an airstrike in the Syrian war. And by 2013, me and my brother were almost killed by a mortar rocket that hit me and him when we were talking on a sidewalk in the city. Then I went to the family and I told them, it's not time to do medicine, it's not time to do business, it is time to survive. With only our clothes actually on our backs, we headed to the Lebanese borders. When we arrived there, we became refugees. It was pretty tough 3 years, but we didn't want to play the role of victims. By the end of 2014, everything happened because I was in a taxi from Beirut to Saida. And the taxi driver, he told to me actually about a scholarship from the embassy of Canada to Syrian students. That's why actually I applied. And I was very lucky within 1 month that I got the call, and they invited my family because they believed that me and my family, we knew how to do it in Syria. They believed that we would be a contributive factor into the whole Canadian ecosystem and the Canadian communities as well.
You can see that interview in full in this week's People and Profit. That'll be airing at 12:45 Paris time on Thursday afternoon. Laura, really an incredible story and a lot of wisdom, it has to be said, about not just moving into a new country and starting your own business, but about what governments and organizations can do to help.
Yeah, that's really heartwarming, isn't it? Turning adversity into success. Good for him. All right, Kate, thank you very much indeed. We're going to take a short break. Don't go away.